Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why drivers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Did you know Fast Growing Trees is America's largest and most trusted online nursery with thousands of trees and plants and over 2 million happy customers? Whether you're planting fruit trees, adding privacy, brightening things up with flowers, or bringing in houseplants, Fast Growing Trees has it all. Even better, they can help you find options that are right for your climate, your space, and lifestyle. Click Order Grow. Every plant arrives healthy with the Alive and Thrive guarantee straight to your door. So if you're ready to get planting, this is the moment. Right now, they have great deals on spring planting essentials, up to half off on select plants. And listeners to our show get 20% off their first purchase when using the code WWO at checkout. That's an additional 20% off. Better plants and better growing at fastgrowingtrees.com using the code WWO at checkout. Fastgrowingtrees.com, code WWO. Now's the perfect time to plant. Let's grow together. Use WWO to save today. Offer is valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions apply. Go to growingfasttrees.com for details.
Hi, welcome to Crime Clueless. We're your hosts. I'm Jenna.
And I'm Laura.
Okay, picture a Tuesday morning at an airport. Any airport. You know the scene. Fluorescent lights humming overhead, the smell of burnt coffee from a kiosk nobody's really enjoying, families wrestling with oversized luggage, business travelers speed walking with that particular brand of self-importance. Somewhere, a child is crying. Somewhere else, someone is laughing too loud on a phone call. It's ordinary, it's forgettable, it's background noise. Now, in the middle of all that, a man starts running. Not the kind of running you do when you realize your gate closed 5 minutes ago. Not a jog, not a hustle, a sprint, full speed. The kind of running that makes people stop and stare because something in the back of your brain, something ancient, recognizes that this is not a man trying to catch a flight. This is a man who is terrified. He tears through the terminal. He bursts through a door. He hits the outside air, but he doesn't slow down, not even a little. He crosses the tarmac, reaches a barbed wire security fence, and climbs over it. And then he runs into a field, a sunflower field, just beyond the airport perimeter. And then he's gone. The security cameras keep recording. The fluorescent lights keep humming. The coffee keeps burning. But Lars Mittank has vanished from the face of the earth.
Wow. Did we do this one for a Two Truths and a Lie?
I think we did. You're good.
Good too.
You have a good memory.
I recognize that name, but I'll have to go back and remember what it was because I don't think I remember.
I don't either.
So just to recap, busy public international airport, broad daylight. No one stops him or tries to find out what's going on.
Well, here's the detail that will keep you up tonight. And the detail that has haunted whoever has watched this footage. When Lars Mittank ran out of that airport in Varna, Bulgaria on July 8th, 2014, no one was stopping him. Nobody was chasing him. Not a single person running after him. No altercation, no confrontation. On camera in broad daylight in a busy airport, Lars was alone. Whatever he was running from, no one tried to stop it, and the cameras couldn't see it.
That's interesting. That was my first thought. Okay, when you're running like that, something's happened or something's chasing you. So I know I'm
Hmm.
not running like that unless someone's chasing me.
Right.
Chasing
I think
me.
I have that on a tank top, actually.
Yes. If you see me running, you better start running too because I'm running from something.
Yes, exactly.
I am definitely not a runner. You want there to be a reason too. Why is he running like that? Because that's
Hmm.
just odd behavior if nothing's going on for him to be running from.
Exactly. And he left everything behind: his luggage, his passport, his wallet, his phone, the only life he had ever known, sitting in a pile at the Varna airport. Lars disappeared into a Bulgarian summer. He was never seen again.
So let me ask, could they see him before he started running? Do they have him on camera just like sitting with his stuff and then he just takes off?
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah. I'll send you the footage so you can see it too.
We'll have
Pretty,
to post it on our blog too for our listeners.
yeah, we'll post a link to that. Lars was 28 years old. It was his first time ever leaving Germany, and we have no idea what happened to him. Today, we are going on one of the most baffling, most watched, most debated missing persons cases the internet has ever seen. We're going to walk you through who Lars was, what happened to him in those final days before he was seen running through an airport, what investigators found, and crucially, what they didn't find. And by the end of this episode, we really want to know what you think because 11, almost 12 years later, nobody has the answer. So let's start from the beginning. I want you to know about who Lars was. Here's what strikes you immediately when you start learning about Lars. He was boring in the best possible way.
I love that.
Yes. Lars was born on February 9th, 1986, in Berlin, Germany. He grew up in a small town called Itzehoe in the Schleswig-Holstein region of northern Germany, the kind of place where everybody knows your name, where you probably went to school with the same 30 kids from kindergarten through graduation, where the rhythms of life are steady and predictable and quiet. And Lars liked it that way. He worked at a power plant in, and I'm very sorry if I get these names wrong, Wilhelmshaven, Germany's only deep water port and its largest naval base. Is a stable job, a good career, the kind of employment that tells you something about a person, that they show up, they're reliable, and they take their responsibilities seriously.
So nothing really in his history at this point that would hint to something going on. No anxiety, prior incidents, nothing with his friends or family was ever flagged or anything like that.
Nothing. And that's not for a lack of people looking. After he disappeared, reporters and investigators went through his life with a fine tooth comb. They talked to his friends, his colleagues, his family. They looked for anything: a history of panic attacks, a previous episode, a moment where someone close to him thought something seemed off. And they came up empty every single time. The word that comes up over and over again in every interview from every person who knew him is normal, not just stable, genuinely, unremarkably, boringly normal, which actually makes this case harder to explain, not easier. Because if there had been a history, if someone had said, well, he did have that episode 2 years ago, or they'd said he'd been struggling with anxiety for a while, then you'd have a framework. You'd have something to hang the behavior on. Instead, what you have is a man with a completely clean psychological history who appears to experience what looks like an acute paranoid break within 24 hours of being left alone. And the clinical reality is that that does happen. First psychotic episodes can occur with no warning, no prior history, often triggered by stress or physical trauma. And they tend to emerge in men in their late 20s, which is exactly where Lars was. But knowing that it's possible doesn't make it any less shocking when you look at who he was. Because nothing about Lars should have ended this way, and that's exactly why nobody can let it go. Now, outside of work, he had a large social circle, a tight group of friends he'd known for years. He had a long term girlfriend, and at the center of everything, his family. Lars was genuinely close with his parents in a way that honestly a lot of 28-year-old guys aren't. When his father suffered a stroke, Lars didn't just send a card or check in once or twice. He went over after work regularly. He helped around the house. He showed up.
That definitely says a lot about who he was as a person, not just someone who disappears voluntarily and lets his family suffer and just disappears without saying anything.
Absolutely. And that's always been one of the most compelling arguments against the voluntary disappearance theory for me. Because when you look at the profile of someone who walks away from their life intentionally, who chooses to vanish and never make contact, a lot of times there's something they're running from, a debt or a relationship that's collapsed, maybe a secret life that's become unsustainable. And with Lars, investigators looked, his friends were interviewed, his family was questioned, and nobody could find anything. No hidden problems, no reason to run. But more than the absence of a motive, it's exactly what you said. It's the character of him. He was always the kind of person that showed up. And the idea that that same man would not board a plane, make no calls, send no messages, that he would let his mom spend 12 years printing flyers and appearing on television and building a Facebook group with 55,000 members while he was alive somewhere, choosing silence doesn't square with anything anyone knew about him. Voluntary disappearance requires a selfishness that everyone who knew Lars said simply wasn't in him. Now, Lars was a Werder Bremen fan. And if you know anything about German football culture, you know that's not just a hobby, that's an identity. He was passionate about it, he was vocal about it. The kind of fan who will absolutely start a spirited argument in a bar over a rival club, which, as we'll get into in a minute, turns out to be deeply relevant. Here's what every single person who knew Lars said about him in interview after interview. When reporters came knocking after he disappeared, they said normal, but also kind, easygoing, grounded. No history of mental illness, no drug problems, no criminal record, no dark secrets that anyone knew of, no reason to expect that anything like this could ever happen to him. His mother, Sandra, described their relationship as incredibly close. They spoke often. She knew his routines, his moods, his friends. She was not a mother who lost touch with her son. She would have known if something was wrong. And then there's this detail, this trip to Bulgaria, the vacation where everything unraveled. It was the first time that Lars had ever left Germany. He was excited for a week at a beach resort with his closest friends in a country he'd never had the opportunity to see during the summer of the World Cup. It was supposed to be an adventure, a story to tell, the kind of trip you look back on and laugh about for years.
So was he traveling with his friends? Were they in the airport as well, or was he there alone?
He was there alone, and we'll get
Was he
into
meeting
why.
them there?
No, he'd already had his vacation. Something
Oh,
happens at the end of this trip that leaves
okay.
him flying back on his own.
Okay. And he's 28 and this is his first trip abroad, correct?
Mhm. Yes.
Do you feel like that kind of level of unfamiliarity of traveling like that played into what happened?
I think it's more relevant than people give it credit for, and not in an obvious way, not like he was naive or unprepared, because by all accounts, he was having a perfectly normal holiday. But I do think it created the perfect conditions if something was already starting to surface. For example, if this had happened in Germany, I think the outcome might have been different. Instead, it became the last chapter of the life anyone knew him to have. So, how do you go from that, from a completely ordinary, stable, loved young man on a routine holiday to sprinting out of an airport alone and never being seen again. It starts with a bar, a football prank, and a night that Lars never fully explained to anyone. Our story starts on June 30th, 2014. Lars and 5 of his closest friends touched down in Varna, Bulgaria. For Lars, stepping off that plane is a first. Like I said, he's never been out of Germany before. And from everything we know, he's thrilled about it. He is very excited about the Golden Sands, which is the resort where they're staying. It's basically Bulgaria's answer to Ibiza. Sun-drenched beaches, cheap drinks, packed clubs, wall-to-wall European tourists chasing a good time. It's exactly what a group of late 20-something friends wants from a summer holiday. And for most of the trip, that's exactly what they get. The week flies by. They swim, they sunbathe, they go out. They watch World Cup semifinal games in loud, crowded bars with strangers who feel like friends after a few rounds. By all accounts, Lars is relaxed, happy, exactly where he wants to be. His friend, Paul Roman, would later say on German television simply, quote, "The week went by really fast," which is how good holidays feel until they don't. On July 6th, 2014, it's the second to last night of the trip. The group is out at a bar in town and the World Cup is going on. The place is buzzing. Like we said, Lars is a passionate supporter of his team, and that's actually how this started. Lars didn't walk up to a group of Bayern Munich fans and start swinging. He switched their flags around on their tables, just like a prank, the kind of thing a guy who's a few drinks in and feeling a little cheeky does to wind up the opposing supporters. Lars was a supporter of the other team through and through. And the fans at those tables did not appreciate him messing with their flags. Words were exchanged, things escalated, and at some point later that night, Lars ended up separated from his friends and it stopped being funny.
So this whole thing just started because he switched some flags around as a joke. That's such a specific, almost innocent detail. Did his friends see anything happen or did they only find out the next morning?
So that's the thing. His friends weren't there for any of it. From what we know, Lars got separated from the group after the bar, and they didn't see him again until he showed up the next morning with a cracked jaw.
Oh.
So his friends have no firsthand account of what actually happened between this flag prank and Lars getting beat up by those people after. That gap matters because the only version of events anyone has is Lars. By the time he's telling it, he's already injured, he's shaken, and within 24 hours, he's going to start believing that those men from the bar are hunting him. So we're working backwards from a story told by someone whose grip on reality is about to become at best questionable. What started as a silly wind-up in a bar, the kind of thing that should have ended with maybe a few angry words, but again, it was supposed to be a prank, and then everyone going their separate ways, somehow escalated into something that may have set the entire chain of events in motion, and we don't have a single witness to any of it.
So he was with his friends in the bar and they saw the prank, but then they got separated after that.
Yes. And they don't see him till the next morning.
Okay.
The next morning, Lars comes back and he's been beaten up pretty badly. He tells his friends he was attacked by 4 men, the same men from the argument the night before. And his injuries are serious. He has a cracked jaw, a ruptured eardrum, among other things. He's in pain and he's also shaken up. He does get himself to a doctor who examines him. He confirms that the eardrum is ruptured. This doctor prescribes him an antibiotic called cefprozil. And then the doctor delivers the news that changes the entire shape of what follows. He tells Lars he cannot fly. The pressure change during a flight with a ruptured eardrum can cause severe pain and also lasting damage. He needs to stay in Bulgaria until it heals. His friends aren't supposed to fly home until the next day, and they offer to stay. Lars won't hear it. He insists he's fine, that they should go, and he'll catch a later flight in a day or two. His friends say he seems okay about it, calm even. One friend later recalled that when they said goodbye, Lars was in a good mood, relaxed, not worried. They hug, his friends head to the airport, and they go home to Germany. At this point, Lars is alone in a foreign country for the first time in his life.
So his friends offered to stay and he said no. So do you think he genuinely felt fine in that moment? Or was he trying to protect them from something, do you think?
Honestly, I think he felt fine. I think in that moment, on that morning, he was still Lars, still the guy who showed up for people, who didn't want to be a burden. I think he told his friends not to miss their flight over a sore ear. I think that makes what follows, though, even more devastating because the deterioration happens so fast. One friend described him as being in that good mood and relaxed, and then within hours of being alone, literally just within hours, he's hiding in an elevator and whispering to his mother that men are going to kill him. And that is not a gradual decline. That is like the switch being flipped. And whatever flipped it, it happened the moment he was on his own. Whether it's isolation, amplifying a head injury, or the medication, or something he saw or heard that afternoon that we have no record of, something changed very quickly once those friends got on that plane.
Did he have a possible head injury? Did they check out, do any scans or anything?
I don't see any reporting that says that he has a concussion or anything, but to have a cracked jaw and a ruptured
Yeah.
eardrum, it makes sense that there's a head injury
Yeah.
of some sort.
That's what I was wondering too. It
Yeah.
sounds like he got hit a lot, pretty badly.
Mhm.
And if he didn't go have any scans done, he definitely could have had something more going on.
Absolutely. If you're in a foreign country, you're not going to your doctor, of course. You're going
Yeah.
to maybe the one at the hotel or
Some
someone.
urgent care where my ear
Exactly.
hurts and that's what they
Yeah.
look
And they're
at.
like, okay, here's what's going on. Here's some
Yeah.
medication. Good luck. On July 7th, Lars checked out of the resort where the group had been staying and he moves into a different hotel. This one is closer to the airport. His flight home is being arranged for the following morning. A practical decision, sensible even. And then the night begins. The new hotel has security cameras in its common areas. And what those cameras capture over the next several hours is the first real indication that something has gone seriously, deeply wrong with Lars. You can see him on the cameras pacing constantly back and forth across the lobby. He's checking over his shoulder, scanning the room. He hides inside the elevator, and he's not riding it anywhere. He's just standing inside it behind the closed doors, almost as if the small metal box offers some kind of protection. He leaves the hotel at midnight and returns an hour or so later, and then behaves the same way all over again. This is not a man who's bored or restless or jet lagged. It looks like he's a man who believes he's in danger.
So do we know where he went from midnight to 1 o'clock?
Nobody seems to know. The hotel cameras show him leaving. They show him coming back roughly an hour later, but there's no footage that anyone was able to find of where he actually went, and no one has ever come forward to say that they saw him. Now, if you're being charitable, maybe he went for a walk because he couldn't sleep and he was too anxious to stay in the room. Maybe he was checking the perimeter, trying to see if anyone was watching the hotel, which really does fit with the paranoid state he was already in. But the darker read is that something happened in that hour, that he encountered someone or saw something that just really ratcheted up his fear from bad to unbearable. At 1 a.m., Lars calls his mother and he's whispering. He's not talking quietly, he's whispering. He tells her he has to keep his voice down in case the 4 men hear him. And if you remember, he said 4 men beat him up after the bar a day or two before. He tells her they're following him. They're going to rob him. He says that they're going to kill him. And he asks her urgently and desperately to cancel all his bank cards immediately so that his location can't be tracked. Now, his mom is hundreds of miles away in Germany. She's listening to her son whisper in the dark from a hotel room in Bulgaria, and she's trying to stay calm for him. They talk for a long time, and they talk multiple times through those early morning hours. In one of those calls, Lars asked her something that stands out. He asked her what exactly is in the antibiotic he was given that was prescribed for his ear.
What do you think she was thinking in that moment? Did she believe what he was saying, or did she think he was being just paranoid?
I think she was trying to do both things at once, believe him enough to take action, but not believe him enough so that she could stay calm, talk him down, and help him through this. If you fully believe your son when he says 4 men are trying to kill him, I think you would completely fall apart, and you can't help him from that place. So I think Sandra did what parents do in impossible moments. She tried to stay practical. She told him to cancel the cards. She booked him a flight, and she told him to go see the airport doctor. She gave him a plan. I think part of her was hoping this plan, the structure of it, the steps, do this, then do this, then do this, would be enough to get him home. What I find heartbreaking in hindsight is that she was right to be afraid. Whatever was happening to Lars, it was real to him in the most absolute way. And she heard it in his voice. She knew on some level that this wasn't her son just being dramatic. She just had no way of knowing how bad it was going to get before morning.
Do we think that these men were talking to him in some way? Was there anything like on his cell phone from them? Any odd text messages or phone calls or things like that?
Not that anybody has ever brought up, any investigators or anything like that. And I do think since he switched hotels, it's hard to imagine them knowing where he was at this point. And also, he was supposed to be back in Germany now.
Yeah, unless they were watching him. I mean,
And they might
could have
been.
been. Seems very overreacting to a prank about flags in a bar, though.
Right. Agreed.
Did they find these men to talk with them, or no one knows who they are?
To my knowledge, no one knows who they are. And I don't believe that they've ever come forward saying, yes, we beat this man up and we thought we were trying to kill him. You know,
Yeah, that's interesting. Because it kind of feels like maybe you would if people in Bulgaria were looking for men who might have been searching for him. They'd be like, we beat him up, but we left after that.
Right. And they were also supporting a different football club from Germany. So it feels like they were traveling as well. This feels like a resort town where most of the people, especially at where they were traveling there. So I don't know.
They might have gone home. They might not have even seen that this happened.
Right. Yeah. One interesting thing about that phone call with his mom is that in the middle of this conversation where he is convinced those 4 men are after him, going to hurt him or even kill him, he then stops to ask about his medication. So some people believe that in that moment, some part of Lars was beginning to wonder whether the pills were doing something to him, whether the paranoia he was feeling was real or from this medication, and whether he could even trust his own mind, which I do think kind of lends itself to maybe they weren't there, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Lars never got an answer that he was satisfied with. And then there's a detail from those early morning calls that is also interesting. By 5 a.m., Lars had arrived at the airport and he called his mom again to confirm and let her know that he had made it safely. During that call, though, he told her that he no longer had any money, which directly contradicted what he said earlier. He had told his mom that he still had cash on him. And nobody has ever explained that inconsistency. Did someone take the cash from him? Did he spend it on something in that missing hour of time the night before? Or it's even possible that he forgot he had it on him when he's thinking about canceling all of his bank cards. Maybe he's only thinking about that and forgot about the cash. We don't know. It's a thread that just hangs there unresolved.
You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you may not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with discounts that are easy to come by. In fact, 99% of their auto customers earn at least one discount. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary.
His mom is frightened and desperate to get her son home. She books him the first available flight back to Germany. She tells him, stay at the airport, see the doctor there, make sure you're cleared to fly, and then come home. So Lars agrees, and he's at the airport on the morning of July 8th. He has his luggage, his passport, his wallet, his phone. Seems like he has everything he needs to get home. He follows his mother's instructions and checks in with the airport's medical doctor to get clearance to fly. The doctor's name is Dr. Kosta Kostov. Security cameras pick Lars up as he enters the medical area. He sits down with the doctor. The doctor later describes Lars' behavior throughout the consultation as nervous and erratic. He tells Lars that he is medically cleared to fly. Lars doesn't leave. He stays in the office, expressing doubt about the medication that he's been taking.
Was he taking the medication? Had he been taking it?
Here's the thing. This detail barely gets mentioned in most coverage of this case. Everyone lands on the Cephrasil angle because it's tidy. It gives the whole thing an explanation and doesn't require that anyone's done anything wrong or any conspiracy or anything like that. But he actually never filled the prescription, they think. So they think even though he's asking about it and saying that might be making him feel this way, it feels like an explanation that has a hole the size you could drive a truck through. It's possible that the doctor gave him some samples and then he had a prescription he was supposed to go fill when he got home, maybe, or take this right now and then go fill it. So it's possible that both things are true. Like he didn't actually fill his medication, but he had taken some. We don't know.
Interesting. Yeah. Cause that could be like if they had a Z-Pack or something and then he was supposed to go get more, or if that's all that he was doing, just a few days or whatever, that could make sense. But
exactly.
Interesting. I wondered if he had mentioned that to the doctor, if they had asked him about that, if they found any of the medication with his things.
The thing is, the doctor at the airport, his version of events changes several times. So when we're talking about Lars, the phone call and the sequence of events, there's either some kind of head trauma, something like that, or he did take the medication and it reacted strangely, or he really was in danger. And when he was running, it was the only rational thing to do. But the doctor, in every interview he had after this happened, because this is like Lars coming to this doctor at the airport, that is on surveillance. And so they talked to him quite a bit. While Lars is in there waiting, someone walks in, and this doctor's version of events changes over and over. And at one point, he describes whoever walked in as a construction worker. And the airport was undergoing renovation at the time, so that's possible. But at other times when he's interviewed, he suggests that whoever walked in was an airline employee. And who exactly walked in while Lars was in there has never been definitively established. What we do know is what happened next. The doctor said that Lars began to tremble, and then he said something out loud that the doctor says he would never forget. He said, quote, "I don't want to die here. I have to get out of here."
Wow. To me, that sounds like someone who sounds less like someone having a psychotic break and more like someone who genuinely believes they're in danger, I
Yeah,
guess.
right? That's exactly what gets me about it. Because when people describe like a psychotic break, a true disassociative episode, or a full break from reality, the language is usually fractured, confused. People say things that don't make linear sense, but "I don't want to die here. I have to get out of here" is coherent and direct. It sounds like Lars is articulating a specific rational fear. Now, a counter argument would be that sometimes paranoid psychosis can be incredibly real, that
Yeah.
the terror feels completely real and the thinking feels completely logical, even when it isn't.
Yeah. I was thinking about that too. So it could
Mhm.
be that paranoia.
Yeah. And combine it with the doctor saying that he seemed nervous and erratic, possibly the unfilled prescription that he really did need. Combine it with the fact that the person who walked through the door was never identified. And you have a moment that, I mean, you can't write off as anything either way. Something in the room scared him badly enough that those were the words that came out. And we still don't know what it was.
So I think I asked before, did they find any of the medication with his things?
That I don't believe that they did, which
Okay.
is why I think that they think he never filled the
Filled it.
prescription.
Okay.
But it could have been in his pocket.
Yeah, it could have been. Did the doctor ask if he was taking anything and he said no, or that's not really reported?
The doctor's version of events changed a lot.
Oh,
So I believe at some points he said he was taking it, and at some points he said he didn't think he was, or that he hadn't
hmm.
filled it, or he hadn't been taking it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
From that point, Lars stood up and he ran. And this is where we started the episode, full sprint through the terminal, past bewildered travelers who stop and stare. He hits the exterior doors and bursts outside into the summer heat. He runs across the open ground towards the airport perimeter. There's the barbed wire security fence. He climbed it. He goes over it. On the other side is a field of sunflowers, and he runs into it. The cameras follow him as far as they can. And then Lars disappears from the frame and from the world and from the lives of everyone who loved him. He left his luggage inside the airport, his passport, his wallet, his phone, every single thing a person needs to exist in the modern world, left behind in a pile at the airport while he ran into a field with nothing but the clothes on his back. The cameras kept recording him. Nobody followed. Nobody knew what had just happened. And by the time anyone went looking, he was gone.
And he got up and ran like that after saying that quote in the doctor's office. And the doctor's like,
Yep.
oh, well, he didn't do anything.
I think he was stunned. Don't know what to do about this. And even if, say, 2 minutes later, he gets up and is like, this guy just left all of his stuff here.
Yeah.
Lars is already gone.
Yeah. So he left everything
Mhm.
behind.
Yeah.
I think people who are genuinely scared for their lives, whether it is a psychotic break or paranoia or something was really happening, they are going to get up and leave all their stuff behind. They just try and get out of there. And maybe they're not really thinking about the things that they might need later if someone is chasing them or if that is what they're thinking is happening.
Exactly.
If
I
they're
mean,
being
you're
chased, you don't stop to grab your things either. So,
exactly. And that's the hardest part because you're right on both accounts. If someone is having that break, they're not really worried about what they're leaving behind. But also, if someone is that scared, they're just getting out of the situation, right?
You do irrational things when you're scared for your life. And if he was genuinely scared for his life, either for real what was happening or in a paranoid state or whatever it was, makes sense, I guess, to just leave everything and try and get out of there.
Yeah. I feel like leaving the belongings tells a story that can contradict or support no matter which theory you're leaning towards. And I keep coming back to this. Maybe he dropped everything not because he chose to, but just the terror of the moment. Those things stopped existing to him. His passport, his phone, his wallet, none of it mattered because none of it was important enough to save him from whatever he believed had just come into that room. It feels like he was genuinely terrified. And again, that can go both ways.
I was thinking too, if he is paranoid, if he is in a paranoid state, thinking these men are following him, maybe he has some kind of brain injury or something from the beating. And whoever came in that room, maybe they had a similar appearance to one of the men who had beaten him up. And that
Absolutely.
just did it for him. And
It was
he's
enough.
like, they have been following me. Look, they're here now. I have to go.
Right. Absolutely.
I'm guessing that's, even if the person didn't look like him, look like any of the people, just a man walking into that room was probably enough for his mind to say, this is one of
Look,
those
he
men.
followed me.
He followed me here. Yeah.
Right. How did he find me? He followed me. I've got to get out of here.
Yeah.
When Lars ran into that field, nobody at the airport understood immediately what they had just witnessed. There was no alarm, no chase, just a man who was there 1 second and gone the next. By the time the gravity of what happened began to sink in, by the time calls were made, authorities were notified, dogs were brought in, Lars had quite a head start. Nobody has ever been able to close it. Police and search and rescue teams descended on the area around the airport pretty quickly, but not immediately. They brought dogs, they brought volunteers. They combed through the sunflower field, into the tree line beyond it, through the surrounding forest and farmlands. For days, they searched, and they found nothing. No clothing, no footprints leading anywhere useful, no remains, not a single trace of Lars beyond the surveillance of him climbing that fence and knowing the field that he ran into.
Did they find any blood from climbing the fence?
No.
Because you would assume if you climb over a barbed wire fence, you would get cut up a little bit.
Right. I would think so. But not that they found, and maybe because it was the field and scattered and hard to see. The dogs tracing his scent were able to trace it for a while, but I don't believe that they ever found blood.
Okay.
Because every report says that there was not a single trace of him left behind. And to me, blood would definitely be a trace, right?
Yeah, like blood or ripped clothes on the fence or something like that too. That's
a shoe, a
pretty
watch,
skillful
something.
To leap the fence with barbed wire and not leave any trace behind.
Yes. And that's not to say there wasn't blood somewhere. They just never found it. His mom actually said it's like the earth swallowed him up because, like, no trace. It's just the earth opened and swallowed him up and he was gone. And what you just said, to me, it's one of the most unsettling aspects of the whole case because your instinct is to say, that's impossible. We're talking about a man in t-shirt and jeans who just scaled a barbed wire fence and is now running through a sunflower field in broad daylight. There should be something. Footprints, a thread caught on the fence post, something that the dogs could pick up, and yet nothing. And there are a few ways to read that. One is that he moved faster and further than anyone anticipated. And by the time their search began in earnest, the trail had gone cold. The Bulgarian summers are pretty brutal. 35 degrees Celsius heat, dry ground, conditions that don't preserve evidence well. Another reading is that he had enough of his wits about him to move deliberately, maybe even to somehow avoid leaving a trail. And then there's the reading that nobody wants to say out loud, that someone else was involved in making sure there was nothing to find. Because a total absence of evidence isn't just unusual. And in a case this high profile with this many resources thrown at the search, it feels almost unnatural. The Bulgarian authorities did what they could, but the investigation hit walls almost immediately. The construction worker or airline employee who entered the doctor's office and appeared to trigger Lars' flight was never publicly identified. Whether he was tracked down and interviewed, we don't fully know, and that detail alone has fed years of speculation. Varna Airport in 2014 was not a facility with the kind of rigorous access logging that might exist in a major international hub. The construction workers on the renovation project may not have been formally credentialed or documented in a way that made them easily traceable. And by the time anyone thought to ask, like really ask systematically, days had passed and the construction crew had moved on and memories were already fading. What bothers me, though, is the fact that they say he was never identified. It's that nobody seems to have pushed enough to change that. And this is the single moment that appears to trigger Lars' flight. And whether it's because this person looked like whoever he'd been in an altercation with or not at all, it still feels important. It's the most important 30 seconds of this entire case. And the best we have is a doctor whose account keeps shifting between interviews and a description that changed from construction worker to airline employee. That doesn't feel very solid. Those feel like two very different jobs. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the fact that the doctor's story keeps changing is something I feel like is super interesting, because even if we don't know for certain who entered that room, the whole trigger moment of this case is built on shaky ground at best. The doctor can't even give a solid account of what he was talking about or doing with Lars. That's
completely. Yes. To be somewhat charitable to the doctor, I mean, yeah, eyewitness accounts change, memories unreliable, maybe especially under the pressure of this high profile case where every word is scrutinized. He may not have been lying. He might just have a human fallible memory. But the problem is his account is essentially the only firsthand record we have of what happened in that medical office, because Lars can't tell us. The cameras covered the corridor, but not the interior of the exact room that Lars was in. So everything we know about that trigger moment, whoever it was, where he says Lars seemed nervous, erratic, that he was trembling when this person walked in, it comes from one source, and that source is giving conflicting versions. That doesn't mean it didn't happen the way it's been reported, but it means that we should be holding that account with a lot more scrutiny than most of the coverage does. Because if the trigger was something other than, say, a construction worker or an airline employee walking in, if it was something more specific, more targeted, then it really changes the whole shape of this case.
So you said that there were cameras like in the corridor, so they can't see people. Wouldn't they be able to see whoever was walking towards that area?
You would think so. And you would think there wouldn't be a ton of people at that time in the morning.
And you would be able to see construction workers versus airline employees, whoever is walking that way, unless that was like a highly trafficked. If they were doing construction directly in that area, maybe there were a lot of construction workers around and they can't really see where they were going. But you think you would see if an airline employee walked through that area?
Yeah, I
And
agree.
can you see the doors to the room he's in, and you just can't see inside?
That's what it sounds like. Not all of that has been released to the public, so I'm not 100% sure, but I agree. That is exactly right. If one of those was walking into this medical office early in the morning,
You
how
should
do
be
we
able to
not
see
know
that.
if it's a construction worker or an airline employee? Exactly. I
Because
agree.
he runs out of that room. So he wasn't like sitting in the waiting room waiting for like his discharge papers. He was in that room when the
Mhm.
guy came in. Okay.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah, it seems like you should be able to see more from the cameras if they can see the corridor where he's sitting or where
yes,
his room
where
is.
agreed. Now, back home in Germany, the case escalated beyond a local missing persons report. The German Federal Criminal Police Office, which is the BKA, became involved and began working with the Bulgarian authorities through Interpol for a missing person case involving a foreign national. This was the appropriate channel. The two agencies shared information, coordinated inquiries, and worked to piece together Lars' movements. But the frustrating reality of international missing persons investigations is that jurisdiction is complicated, resources are stretched. Bulgaria in 2014 was not a country with a deep infrastructure for this kind of prolonged cross border investigation. The BKA could push, and they did push, but they were ultimately dependent on the Bulgarian authorities on the ground in a city where Lars had no roots, no connections, and no one knew him. And the trail was cold almost from the start. If there was one person who was refused, absolutely refused to let this go quiet, it was Sandra. From the moment her son disappeared, she didn't wait for the institutions to find answers. She built her own search operation piece by piece with the determination of someone who simply cannot accept that her child is gone without a reason. And I can't even imagine being in her position. I feel like I would move to Bulgaria if that
Yeah.
were my daughter, right? She hired a private investigator. He went to Varna. He watched the airport footage over and over, looking for details that the initial review might have missed. He contacted hospitals across Bulgaria, checking whether any unidentified persons had been admitted around the time that Lars disappeared. He reached out to homeless shelters. He walked the streets handing out missing persons flyers with Lars's face on them. He found nothing that cracked the case open. But the effort mattered because it did keep Lars' story alive in Bulgaria at a time when it might have otherwise faded. Sandra also took her search to television. She appeared on programs in both Germany and Bulgaria, pleading for any information, showing the footage, describing her son. She wanted every person in the area, in the country, to know Lars's face. She wanted someone, anyone who had seen him, to come forward. She also built something online that has taken on a life of its own. There's a Facebook group called Find Lars Mittank. As of 2025, it had over 55,000 members. People from across Europe and beyond following for updates, sharing theories, sending in tips, keeping the conversation alive more than a decade after that summer in Bulgaria. 55,000 people who refuse to let this case just go cold. And that's because Sandra wouldn't let it go first.
Wow. So that's so amazing that she built her own investigation from scratch while grieving.
Yes.
Her son is missing. What does it
It's-
say about the official investigation? Did they have anything that they could find? Any leads or anything?
I think his mom having to push so hard and set up her own searches and get her own private investigators, the official channels, the BKA, Interpol, Bulgarian police, They did what they were supposed to do procedurally. The right agencies were notified, the right protocols were followed, but protocol and justice or finding Lars, it's not the same thing. And the reality is that when a young German man disappears in Bulgaria with no obvious crime scene, no clear evidence of foul play, he becomes a very difficult case to keep resources on. Investigations have to be prioritized, and unfortunately, cold cases get filed away, which is the brutal arithmetic of how missing persons investigations work, and especially when it's crossing multiple jurisdictions. And Sandra refused to accept that. Sandra made herself impossible to ignore and did all of the things that the resources for the official channels just, they didn't have the resources to do. So she went full out. She was not willing to let it be a cold case no matter what. Over the years, reported sightings of Lars have trickled in from places that tell you just how far this case has traveled, geographically and online. About a year after he disappeared, a truck driver near Varna claimed to have seen a man matching Lars' description hitchhiking on a remote road close to the airport. It couldn't ever be confirmed, though. A homeless man in Poland surfaced who bore a strong resemblance to Lars. Investigators looked into it. It wasn't. Someone on Reddit claimed to have spotted Lars in Canada, which has never been verified. In 2016, there was a flurry of excitement when reports came from Brazil that Lars had been found, and the world held its breath for a moment. But then the truth came out. The man in Brazil was a different missing person entirely. His name was Anton, and he was from Canada. He had been missing for 5 years. Two families' heartbreak briefly tangled together.
Well, it's devastating because in that moment, every person who loved Lars had hope, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's taken away and it's actually someone else's missing person, which is so amazing for them. That's incredible to find their person in Brazil
after 5
years later.
Isn't that wild? Yeah. And Anton's story is almost a mirror of what people hoped had happened with Lars. A man found walking barefoot on a highway, disoriented, no ID, no memory of who he was. That's almost exactly the scenario that Sandra had always believed Lars might be living. Somewhere out there, alive but lost, maybe not knowing his own name. And for a moment in 2016, it looked like proof that that scenario was possible, that a person could disappear completely and turn up years later on the other side of the world, disoriented, but alive. And then it wasn't Lars, and that hope collapsed. And Sandra had to grieve all over again while simultaneously being relieved for a family she'd never met. And I can't imagine carrying that, finding out it's not your son, but feeling grateful that it is someone else's.
Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why drivers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
In 2019, a German truck driver came forward to say he had given a hitchhiker a ride from Dresden to a town in Brandenburg, Germany. He later saw the coverage of Lars' case and said the man in his cab looked like an older version of Lars. Authorities investigated. No confirmation. In 2020, Sandra received a photograph. Someone had sent her a picture of a young homeless man spotted in Dusseldorf who resembled her son. Authorities looked into it. It was also not Lars. Every single lead, every sighting, every person who picked up their phone to say, I think I saw him, each one had ended the same way, a dead end, a door that opens just wide enough to let the hope in and then closes again. At this point, 11, almost 12 years on, they've not found Lars's body, and none of the sightings have ever been confirmed. There's really no resolution. There are 4 serious theories that investigators, researchers, and the online community keeps coming back to. The first is a medication induced psychosis. And this theory is the one that most people land on. The antibiotic that Lars was prescribed for his ear does carry paranoia as a documented, although rare, side effect. Combine that with a head injury, isolation in a foreign country, disrupted sleep, stress, and the psychological weight of being alone abroad for the first time in your life. And that picture starts to form. Except the airport doctor did note that Lars hadn't actually filled his prescription. And again, we touched on that. There is a way where he didn't fill his prescription, but might have taken it anyways. But if that is the case, then this accepted explanation for everything kind of falls apart completely, because you can't have a drug reaction to a drug you never took, which means there was either paranoia that was a product of the head injury alone or some kind of mental illness that surfaced under extreme stress. And possibly, and this is the part that should make you uncomfortable, it's possible that the threat was real and it wasn't psychosis.
Yeah, I had looked up that medication and it says paranoia is not commonly listed, but they have been linked to confusion, mental changes, anxiety, nervousness, agitation, hallucinations, even.
Oh, wow.
And rare psychotic episodes, which I thought was very interesting. It says potentially symptoms resembling paranoia or acute psychosis. They're super rare, less than 1%. And usually it happens within 1 to 5 days of starting the antibiotic and stops after you stop taking it. So I think really would be nice to know if he was taking it, if the first doctor had given him a sample pack, what he was taking.
Right.
I think that could make a huge difference on this case too.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, if it was a head injury or something combined with that, I don't know.
Rupturing an eardrum is not minor.
No,
that takes
they
a lot.
probably were doing a lot to him. And if there's 4 of them hitting him, broke his jaw, that's a lot.
Right.
I don't know. And maybe someone was after him, but I wonder if it was something from the antibiotic. If he had taken that, maybe he did have this really rare side effect.
Yeah, because less than 1% isn't never.
It's not never. It can happen, just very, very rare.
Mm-hmm.
But we also know he was severely beaten up very recently too.
Yeah.
It's really hard to know what was going on.
Well, and add on to that, the sleep deprivation. We know he was leaving the hotel, coming back at 1 on the phone through the night. Also going to the airport really early. He might have been injured, exhausted, overwhelmed. And
sleep exhaustion, we've talked about that. That can cause problems with your mental health too.
Absolutely. Another theory is that the foul play was real. Not everyone is convinced the threat was imaginary. Lars told his mother 4 men were hunting him. The same 4 men, presumably, who had beaten him badly enough to rupture his eardrum 2 nights earlier. Those men were never identified, never found, never interviewed, at least that we know of publicly. And the person who entered the doctor's office, the one whose identity even the doctor couldn't keep consistent, was never named either. Some people believe that Lars saw someone in the airport who he genuinely recognized as a threat. and that his sprint wasn't psychosis at all. It was survival instinct. Whether he escaped that threat or didn't, nobody knows.
That's super interesting, especially with him not being found. I know we said earlier, maybe someone did pick him up. They saw where he was going and picked him up somewhere outside of that sunflower field, something like that, where they didn't find a trace of him anywhere.
Right. It's really hard now to just disappear.
Yeah.
And if something happened that didn't involve outside foul play, that's really hard to never be found.
Yeah,
I
for
don't
sure.
know.
And it's like, oh no, did he get to the beach and try and swim somewhere? That's the only other thing that I could think of where they wouldn't be able
Oh, yeah.
to find him.
Right.
But it's odd that the dogs weren't able to trace him very far, especially like we said before, he had climbed that barbed wire fence. There should have probably been blood somewhere, but they didn't find that either. So it's really odd.
Well, and where his suitcase was left, they have so many things for the dogs to get his scent from to then track him. It's not that they're going off of nothing or that it's getting mixed up because he didn't leave anything behind.
Yeah.
It is really odd.
And they can see where he went. They know where he went to. They should have a starting point.
At the very least. Yeah. The third theory is that Lars is still alive, but living off the grid. Some researchers have pointed out that rural Bulgaria in 2014 was remote in ways that are hard to imagine for Western Europeans. Certain areas had limited mobile phone access, limited internet, limited exposure to the news and the media. So the theory goes that Lars ran into the forest, made his way to one of these very rural, off the grid communities with no ID, no money, no phone, that he simply built a new existence there, maybe suffering from a head injury, possibly amnesia, or maybe by choice. A man unrecognizable from the person he used to be, living quietly somewhere that maybe never got the memo he was missing. And here's the detail that makes this harder to dismiss than it might seem. Lars had experience in hunting, fishing, and trapping. This was not a man with zero survival instinct dropped into the wilderness. He did have practical skills, and whether those skills would be enough against the Bulgarian summer heat with no food, no money, no shelter, that's another question. But it does mean that we can't write off the possibility as quickly as we might like to.
That is an interesting theory, especially since he had that background. Does that make you more hopeful? Or I don't know, it kind of makes things sadder leaving his family behind if he did do that by choice. Right. Definitely, like we talked about with a possible head injury, that could
where it wasn't
where he doesn't remember.
Choice. Right.
Yeah. But it does mean that he could have those skills to survive and possibly still hasn't been found if he found some remote community and stayed there.
Yep. On one hand, it does completely reframe the idea of Lars alone in this Bulgarian forest, having those skills, the hunting, the trapping. He wasn't a city kid with no outdoor experience who was dropped into the wilderness. He knew how to find food. He knew how to read terrain. He knew how to stay alive with minimal resources. So if anyone could disappear into this rural landscape and sustain themselves without being found, even for a short time, researchers and investigators think that that person might actually be Lars. And that's the hopeful version. I mean, the sadder version is exactly what you said. Those skills make his continued absence harder to explain, not easier. If he survived the initial days, if he made it through that first brutal week of July heat with no money and no ID, then where has he been for 11 years? And like you said, whether that was a conscious choice or something related to the head injury or some kind of amnesia or mental health crisis, at some point, though, those survival skills run out. So there's got to be someone who would recognize him
Yeah.
And just because in 2014 it was limited cell phone, limited internet, is that still the case? Because it's not like his case just fell
Disappeared.
Right, exactly. You've still got the growing Facebook page. You've still got appeals for any information or tips, especially on anniversaries of his disappearance or his birthday, things like that. When you think about that happening, wouldn't you think someone would recognize him in all of those years? Even like a doctor, or can you go that long without
I guess
being
you could
recognized?
if you are out in a rural area, you have a new name, you don't have ID because you live in the forest and or whatever type of area this is. And you have a beard now, maybe your hair is there are ways that he could have changed physically. He could be a lot
Right.
stronger now from having to live this way. I always think of Friends with the Yeti episode where the guy had been
Yeah.
backpacking and he has the long beard and the long hair, and then he has to shave it all and comes back and he looks amazing.
Really
And they don't even
unrecognizable.
recognize him.
Right.
So,
Just from the day before.
yeah. So, if you're living out in the forest and you've changed in that way, maybe,
Yeah.
and then he has a different name he's giving people. I guess I could see that happening, but that's still hard with how much press his mom had done trying to get his name and face out there. I don't know.
I would like to think that that's the answer. I would like to think, and I don't know. It's the only one that really explains why nothing from him has ever been found. But
Yeah.
also, we see that in other cases here
All the time.
Yeah, where people go missing and are not found for a very long time. So,
Or ever.
right.
I was thinking Bryce.
Mhm. Yeah. And
Even like Robert Fisher, where they were looking for him for these murders and he just disappeared and no one's ever found him.
true. Very true.
Oh, Brandon Swanson, same thing.
And those are longer ago. They
Yeah.
happened before this one. I want to
Why-
say all of those. Yeah. I saw a news story maybe like a month or 6 weeks ago. I can't remember. But a mom had left and they didn't find her for 30 years, but she was alive and just living somewhere else. And so that's the reverse of it, where her case was out there a lot. That was in the United States, and she had
I
made
think
the
I saw one
decision
in,
to disappear.
yeah, I think I saw one in
Oh,
Arizona.
that one was even more recent. And
Yeah.
she
And it was a
just like
girl,
left 20 years ago.
it's her
I think.
choice. Yeah. She
Yeah.
wanted to disappear and she had some help and was living somewhere else.
Yep. And no one knew for 20 plus years. So it's
Yeah.
always possible either way.
Yeah.
Yeah. The fourth theory is that there was some kind of accident in that field, which is simple and it's a brutal theory that Lars ran into a sunflower field in that heat, disoriented, terrified. The forest beyond it is pretty dense. He may have become lost, dehydrated. Maybe he was injured from the fence, or that maybe he had a fall. The theory is that maybe he did pass away out there within miles from the airport, and the terrain that was around it swallowed the evidence. This theory says bodies do disappear in remote woodland, and it happens more than people realize. But still, the absence of any remains, bones, clothing, anything after these extensive searches has always made this theory feel really incomplete. But that's all we're left with is theories because nobody knows.
Yeah. I was looking too. The airport is about 2.5 hour walk to a lake.
Oh.
Did they search that lake very well? And
Not
even
that
from
I've
then,
seen
the Black Sea isn't
that far.
or I'm trying to see how far that would be because it looks like the way he ran, looking at the airport, went across because you said he ran across like the tarmac and all of that. That is the direction to that lake, Lake Varna.
Right. But That's not to say you couldn't hitchhike before there was any press to
Yeah.
really any other remote place.
Yeah.
It
But
doesn't
that
even have
lake,
to be like within miles or walking distance.
yeah, that lake isn't horribly far. It's only 15 minutes driving.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
that's an interesting thought
Interesting.
too.
Yeah.
If he made it there, he was disoriented,
Mhm.
thought he was trying to get away from somebody. Something could have happened in the lake.
Yeah. It seems like you can
Oh,
really
that's the Black
explain any of
Sea.
the theories. Like they can all make sense on the surface. There's holes in all of them or reasons why it wouldn't work, but you can still make it make sense, right?
Yeah. The Black Sea isn't that far either away from the airport. I can't really see like how long it would take walking there, but that is another big body of water that isn't horribly far from the airport. It's a ways,
Interesting.
but
But if you hitchhiked,
yeah, Lake Varna is closer to the airport.
it
But-
is possible that he had cash on him, like in a pocket too,
Mhm.
to where he could have taken a bus or a train or something, even though he didn't have his wallet.
Yeah.
Especially if he feels like he's being followed and is in danger, it would make sense to me that he would split up where his money was.
Yeah. I tried to have it do walking distance to the Black Sea, but it said I can't find a way. So
So you would have to
fine.
hitchhike.
Yes. I'm like, I just want you to show me. So he could have gone somewhere else, or if he tried to swim somewhere to get
Right.
away from somebody, an accident could have happened there.
Yeah, that is interesting. The terrain around it.
Yeah. Because
I
the
don't know
airport,
how well that lake was searched. So it really would be in the direction he was running, at least
Yeah.
initially.
yeah,
Yeah.
it'd be interesting to see if they did search that lake.
Yep. And what methods were used or how soon.
And it does lead out to the sea, the Black Sea there. So it could have been washed out that way, even if it had been a while.
Right. It does feel, since the dogs lost the scent, that possibly he did hitchhike or get a ride. And from there, you wouldn't have any idea which direction he wanted to go.
Yep.
Well, today, Lars would be 40 years old. His case is still officially open. The BKA still lists him as missing. His mom still updates the Facebook group. She still prints flyers. She still gives interviews when anyone will listen. She has said publicly that she believes her son's injuries left him with some form of memory loss. She believes that he is out there somewhere, possibly homeless, not knowing who he is, or that anyone is looking for him. And the footage is still out there, still being watched, 16 million views and counting, growing every time the story is shared, the anniversaries, when his mom gets new interviews. People slow it down, they zoom in, they analyze every frame, they argue in the comment sections about the person who walked into that office, about the moment that Lars reacted, about what exactly he saw or thought he saw in the airport. Nearly 12 years of analysis, and the footage still hasn't given up its secret. Sandra was asked once what it feels like to watch it, what it feels like to see her son terrified, alone, on that security camera over and over again. She said, quote, "Every time I see that video, I feel like I want to protect him. I want to rescue him."
Oh, it's so sad. How would she even respond to that? Of course, she feels that way. And if she's watched that video hundreds of times, that's what she feels every single time. That's just so hard.
So heartbreaking. That single sentence contains the entire 12 years. Every flyer she printed, every television appearance, every morning she woke up and chose to keep looking instead of letting herself grieve. It's all in those words. And what makes it almost unbearable is the specifics of it. Not, I miss him or I want him home, but I want to rescue him. present tense, active, like she's still in that moment, watching him sprint across the parking lot, the tarmac, and the only thing standing between her son and whatever he's running from is the screen she's watching it on. She has seen that footage more times than any person should ever have to see the last recorded moments of their child. And every single time she feels it the same way. And that's not grief, that's a vigil that never ends. And here's what we keep coming back to. Whatever happened to Lars, whether it was a head injury that fractured his grip on reality, or a very real threat that caught up with him, or a forest that kept him, he was a good person, a son who visited his parents after work, a friend who told the people he loved not to miss their flights on his account, a man who, on his first trip abroad, trying to have a good time, ran into something none of us can fully explain. He deserves an answer. His mother deserves an answer. And until someone comes forward, until that one piece of information surfaces that finally makes the picture whole, the case of Lars remains exactly what it has always been: open, unsolved, and haunting. If you have any information about the disappearance of Lars Mittank, please contact the German Federal Criminal Police Office, or the BKA, or reach out through the Find Lars Mittank Facebook group, which is FINDET, and then his name. And it is still actively monitored by his family. And that is the case of Lars Mittank.
Such an interesting case, and so many questions with no answers, which is so hard. So hard for his family. It's so sad. And sad, I think, for his mom, speaking with him that whole night before and trying to walk him through it and just get him home. And then that 1 second where he snapped in the airport and ran away. And she probably thought, he's there, he's going to make it home. And so
just
sad.
Get on the plane. Just get on the plane, and then we'll fix it all when you get home.
Yeah. So sad.
It's a tough one. And I really do hope that they get answers.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Crime Clueless. If you want to learn more about this case or see the resources that we used to create it, you can find it on our blog, which is on our website, crimeclueless.com. And we also link it in the show notes. We are on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Just search for @CrimeClueless. We would love to connect with you, hear your thoughts, theories, any case suggestions. And finally, if you enjoyed today's episode, we would be so grateful if you would take just a couple seconds to rate, review, or share our podcast. Your support helps us reach more listeners and grow our amazing community. You can find Crime Clueless on all streaming platforms. And as always, remember, refuse to be clueless, careless, or caught off guard.
Not today, murderers.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everybody.